Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Latera Microsystems Spotlight on the Check and Collaborate workflow. This is a session highlighting how Latera Microsystems products work together in the day-to-day document lifecycle. One housekeeping point at the beginning: if you have a question you'd like to ask, please type it into the questions section of your GoToMeeting interface. I'm Richard McDougall, the Product Manager for ChangePro, and we are joined today by Theo Lister, the Product Manager for Litigation Companion. Hello, Theo.
Hi there, Richard. We've been talking for a few hours already today, but good to speak to you again.
Yes, always my pleasure. Today's discussion will be broken into three parts: the workflow between an author and a collaborator, and each of two of our popular products, Litigation Companion and ChangePro. Based on our experience at Latera Microsystems and discussions with our customers, this is the general workflow we're familiar with. The attorney and the client go back and forth in the drafting process, making changes and sharing their expertise. The attorney uses Litigation Companion to help build the document and ensure its accuracy. And before the document is sent back to the client, ChangePro is used to highlight the changes. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Theo now so that he can give you a brief presentation of Litigation Companion.
Yes, I'll show you Litigation Companion, and apologies, Richard, I stole control of the screen. I wanted to make sure I had things turned over. So you should be able to see just on screen now. So this is a sample complaint. So this is a potential litigation document. And what Richard was detailing just then, that triangle between using Litigation Companion, using ChangePro, and communicating with the client or externally. This document here, we're going to assume has gone through quite a few iterations already. So this is mostly there, and now it's just a case of reviewing it and making sure that I have the ability to summarize what I've been running through. So in a conventional document, you might have a table of contents, and in this one, I'm going to forgo that. But if I scroll through, you can see at the end here, I've tried to summarize what I've been citing here as well. And this is manually typed. It's relatively tidy, but it doesn't fully reflect the body of what's in here. This has gone through a few iterations since I actually put this in here, and now things have all changed. That happens to the best of us, and that's just something that we need to adapt to. It's also something that we capitalize on with certain parts of our product suites. So I have in my Latera tab just up here quite a few of our products. This is part of our companion suite, and Litigation Companion itself is composed of these buttons here. You'll see also, and this is a little sneak peek for later, we've got ChangePro on here as well as two of our other products, Clause Companion and DocX Tools Companion. But for now, I'm just going to focus on Litigation Companion. The table of authorities feature here. So this is relatively new, and this is what I'm going to focus on now. If I click on it, you'll see in the right-hand side of my screen, it's now showing me the citations and legislations, or the authorities that have been picked up in my document. I can still select them and scroll through them if I want, and actually if I did that, assuming that I'm going through this legitimately, there's actually still a few things that are wrong with my citations and that I should probably correct. For example, I can see a few things left without dates or full citation formats. And of course, from this panel here, I can always click to select what gets included, what doesn't get included. But really, for the sake of argument here and for showing what the product can do, I'm just going to select everything, assuming that it's been gone through correctly, because of course we have other features that can handle that kind of thing. And in this document, because people's preferences vary, I like to put my table of authorities all the way at the top of the document, so it's one of the first things you see. I think Richard has a different opinion and likes them at the bottom, like where they can be easily noted and don't affect the numbering of the pages of the document too much. But either way, if there's one in the document, and this applies for ones that are using proper Word field codes or ones which have just been typed in, I can click select so that I actually find it, because what I don't want is to be inserting a table of authorities at the top of my document. There's already one at the bottom of my document, and now I've got two of them to deal with, and they say different things. That's why I can just quickly navigate to that. And then I can get started with actually creating it as well. So if I click this, this gives me just a few extra options, because different courts have different preferences, different drafters have different preferences. These are mine for the time being, and this is carried over from the last time that I generated a TOA. And I'm going to replace the existing one, so I can get rid of what's here already and then insert the new one over the top of it. So you can see now, I had an old version with a few citations, and now I have a new version with a few more. And the changes aren't readily apparent. I mean, it's obvious that something has changed because this is much, much bigger now, but I can't really tell exactly what's changed between those two versions. Maybe if I'd done a more thorough proofread of the documents, then there'd actually be way more than we have here, because I didn't actually go through that step here, but assuming I did, there could be a lot more to see as well. And the changes that you make to complex objects like tables, they can be even more difficult to see. Had I run track changes and made this change, it would have just shown that I deleted an entire table and inserted an entire table, not really showing me what's changed between the two very effectively. And that's kind of so complicated that I don't really want to deal with this myself either. I'm actually going to pass this along to Richard, and he can show us a more effective way of doing that. So Richard, I sent you an email earlier with the two different versions in there. So I think you should have everything you need to show the next part of this workflow.
Yes, and let me open that email. Here you see I've received an email from Theo. He has sent me the last version of the document and the current version of the document. I have saved those to my local drive, and because I like to work in Word, I'm going to have them both launched in Word. And here you see we have version 11 and version 12. Within Word, I have my Litera ribbon, and under Change Pro, I can compare the open documents. When I click Compare, it wants to make sure that I've saved the documents before it launches to compare. And here we see the Change Pro application, which I have managed to not populate with the open documents. Here we go. I'm sorry, I think I just had the wrong version of the wrong instance of the application open. I've got version 12 and version 11, but it's got version 12 listed as the original. I want to flip-flop them so that version 11 is the original and version 12 is the modified. I'm going to compare them. And here we have the resulting comparison. I scroll down to the bottom to the table of authorities, and you see it's highlighted all the insertions. The first thing I like to do in my workflow is to save it. Change Pro allows me to save my red line. I'm going to overwrite the version that I had saved previously so that I have this version saved. And now I want to share this work with my team. I'm going to set up an email, and I'm going to include the original document, the modified document, and the red line output. And I'm going to zip them all together into a single file. When I click Send Mail, an Outlook message is created. And I can send it to my team. At this point, my work is done. Let's go over what we've seen and what Litera Microsystems has to offer. As shown in our diagram earlier, the drafting process is pretty simple among attorneys, clients, and colleagues. We at Litera Microsystems provide drafting tools for every phase of the document lifecycle. You can start with a Nova or Forte to create a document. You can use any of our check products like Litigation Companion seen earlier, and work through as many rounds of collaborative drafting as needed with Change Pro and Metadact.
And one of the things that, Richard, you touched on, and actually that I mentioned quite a few times during the presentation, was the things that we didn't cover. And those multiple rounds of collaborative drafting, we were assuming that they had already been conducted. And that's because generating that table of authorities, that was considered the final compendium of everything that had been referenced in that document. But really, that's just a slim segment of what you can do with Litigation Companion anyway. We were mainly doing it this way to focus on a particular feature. But across the entire product, and this is just Litigation Companion, I'm sure Richard can talk more about the different features of Change Pro. Litigation Companion has about 10 different features. So all of them are focused on different elements of the document proofreading process. So when I was running through that list of citations, there were a few things that I was picking up on there which looked wrong to me. But the references check, for example, elsewhere in the product, that's there specifically to look for all the citations in the document, so I can review them and just give them a sense check, but then also analyze them for a few potential errors as well, when they're falling away from the standards that the Blue Book might provide. And it also look for internal cross-references if I've been referring to things elsewhere in the document, legislation, of course, which you'll have seen already, and then also references to external documents. There's the checking of definitions and defined term errors. So maybe not something that happens all the time in litigation documents, but if you have defined something anywhere in the document, it's just useful to have something there so that you can make sure that you're using it, you're referring to it, and you're doing so consistently and accurately. And then there's proper noun checking. So this is a little bit more, this kind of builds on when you have a reference to something like a client's name, an address, dates, currency amounts, phone numbers, social security numbers, you should probably take those out. Making sure that they're there to review, but also that you can correct them as well. So giving you a single location to review all of these things. So none of these issues are potentially wrong. And this is something that is worth surfacing just because when you use proper nouns, that's something that's much easier to pick up on than the actual legal nuance or the reasoning involved in constructing an argument. And under the time pressure that we see people operating under, it's one of the reasons that we want to have tools in place to expedite some of these proofreading checks, some of these collaboration discussions. But when you're under time pressure, it's very tempting to not start from a template and build your document anew, or even draft from first principles. You might just grab something that's been successful in the past, take out all the references to the old clients and the old arguments, but kind of refit things to fit the circumstances. And it happens. People sometimes loathe to admit it, but this is just the fact of play. These kind of things can happen. But the most telling thing there is not necessarily the legal arguments, but if you refer to the wrong clients, if you have a phone number in there that doesn't match up to what somebody is expecting, that's the kind of thing that can really get people annoyed. Worst case scenario might be losing a case. Not usually that bad, but it might be having an awkward conversation with your clients and asking them, them asking you why you're not paying proper attention to due process. and these kind of things. So that being said, there's a lot more to Litigation Companion than just the features we've shown, but I did want to keep it somewhat brief. And also, that's much the same with Change Pro as well. There's a lot more flexibility in running your red lines. That's something we haven't yet touched on, but it's something that Richard has a lot of knowledge on and a lot of opinions about as well, I'm sure.
Thank you, Theo. And it's true, there's a lot more to Change Pro than we just saw. The most important thing I like to stress is how simple it is to use. Change Pro can be invoked from many different places in your workflow. It can be launched from the DMS, and yes, we are iManage Work10 compliant. It can be launched from the file system. Change Pro can be launched from within a Microsoft application, as we saw earlier when I launched it from Word. Or it can be launched within the Change Pro product itself. Whichever environment is used, Change Pro will generate a red line of the changes that can be saved, and you can send the output in native or PDF format and include in that sending any of the original files, all of which can be attached individually to the email or within a zip file. It's that easy, and then the whole workflow can proceed.
And of course, and as Richard said, it's that easy, but we're only, I think, 4 points into this 5-point process. So execution, and whatever this means, so this can vary. It could be submission, it could be signing, but whatever the execution of your document is, really depends on the situation. So court documents, the code here, quite a lot of the time that's going to be submission to the requisite court. But where matters are more delicate, or where clients are more involved in this process, even on the legal nature of things, more so than just the facts, this can still involve a process of back and forth until you're agreed on the substance that's being drafted. With transactional matters, this can be very similar, but with completion then being reaching mutual signature instead. So this is one of the reasons that clear client and lawyer communication is so important, because this is one of those things that can be really fraught with deadlines. The deadline could be the time in which you have to propose a response and submit it to court. The deadline could be that there's a deal on the table, but it's got a limited time frame, and you need to agree your shared message before you can float something across to the external party and see whether they're agreeing to it. So there's lots of deadlines going on, and the core of this, the most important thing is just making sure that when you are trying to make that submission or get to signature, that the attorney and the client are agreed in whatever the shared message is that you want to put forth before it's going to that external party to review. So using collaboration tools ahead of this stage, this is just something that gives you an extra layer of safety and understanding.
Exactly, Theo, and that's, then you've sealed the deal. The project is completed effectively and safely, with all parties knowing that whatever's been negotiated, planned, and executed is exactly what each party has intended. We have a little bit of time for questions and answers. We don't like to run too long, but one question that's been asked is, does this work outside of Word? Theo, you want to talk a little bit about Litigation Companion?
Well, yes, sure, I can. So you saw me open up Word and run Litigation Companion on a Word document. So yeah, Litigation Companion itself, it doesn't work outside of Word. It's a Word add-in and appears in its own pane. The reason for that being that people are drafting on Word documents, and we don't want people to leave Word when they're working on things like this when they're drafting. But when it comes to things like Change Pro, it's a little bit different, and Richard has a bit more information on that.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Change Pro can be invoked within Word, and in this particular workflow that we've seen today, it makes sense to launch Change Pro from within Word. But Change Pro can be invoked from a DMS, from within your Windows file system, or from the application itself. Another question, is this the only way to invoke Change Pro? No, as I just mentioned, it's a desktop application in its own right. It can be accessed through a right click in the file system. And there is the clipboard compare. If you're not familiar with that, perhaps we will show that in a webinar in the future. But the clipboard comparison is a very popular feature with the attorneys who use it. Is Litigation Companion only available to litigators? Well, I'll defer to you, Theo.
Yeah, I can take this. And no, actually. So despite the name, despite calling it Litigation Companion, it can actually be used by any practice group and even non-lawyers. We do have a separate product called Contract Companion, which is aimed more at the transactional side of a law firm. But really, a lot of the core concepts of good drafting remain the same between litigation practice and transactional practice. So Litigation Companion itself, it does have features aimed more towards the litigation side of things. So checking for citations, generating tables of authorities. But this is the kind of thing that it's not always up to the litigator themselves and the lawyers to handle. A lot of these tasks, as we've been hammering on and on about, not just collaboration between the attorney and the client, but before that process, just building a work product that you can share with counsel or with your client. That's the product of a multidisciplinary drafting process internally within the firm. So the litigators, their support staff, there's a whole span of seniority that might have to approve a certain thing before it's able to be shared. So Litigation Companion, despite the name, anyone who wants can use it, but we tend to usually focus on litigators.
Thanks, Theo. And I think what we'll call our last question is, what else can ChangePro do? ChangePro will compare Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and PDF files. The user interface allows saving, zipping, and sending one or more comparisons in a single email. Within Word, it compares text and tables as well as images, charts, graphs, various objects, Visio flow charts, and more. Our intelligent table algorithm provides a easily discernible markup of what has changed within a table without bloating the results or creating an unreadable table. And in all instances, detailed change report can be included. Within PowerPoint, it compares the embedded images and objects in various slides. It detects added and deleted slides. It compares the speaker notes and the slide notes. It compares comments within slides. It enables you to accept and reject changes easily. Within Excel, it compares workbooks or worksheets or selected areas. It compares hidden sheets. It compares not just values, but also the formula within each cell. And it shows added and deleted rows. So it's a pretty robust comparison tool, if I dare say, the most robust comparison tool on the market. So we're just about out of time. We like to run no more than 20 or 25 minutes. So we'll make that the final question. But if you have any other questions or concerns about the product or the document life cycle, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We hope you found this information valuable. Thank you so much for attending. Good day and good night. Theo?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time and for your questions. And feel free to pepper us with more of them if any crop up afterwards.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.